The most unique of all on the London Underground is the Northern Line, that has no less than two main routes that run through central London. The Edgware and High Barnet branches join at Camden Town, where they split once again, and one route runs via Charing Cross and the other runs via Bank. Both branches join up again at Kennington, with one branch heading off to Battersea and the other, in our case, for Morden in Surrey. We begin our journey at Edgware in Middlesex. The station today, designed by Stanley Arthur Heaps, dates from August 1924. The station opened as part of the second phase of the Edgware extension from Hendon Central. We ride aboard a 1995 stock train for the long journey down to Morden. On departure, we can see the Edgware carriage sidings. Back in 1924, when the tube line reached Edgware, the area was just a small village, but despite this was served by two stations. The 1867 built station was located slightly further west than today's one and was not connected in any shape or form to our line. That station closed in 1964, along with the line as far as Mill Hill East, a subject which will be discussed again in the next video. By now, the 1867 Edgware branch was in the hands of the LNER, and it was supposed to be part of the New Works programme that had been initiated by the London Passenger Transport Board back in 1935 for it to link with our line and propel north to Bushy Heath. Intermediate stations were planned to be built at Brockley Hill and Elstree South, with a new depot at Aldenham. The infrastructure for the line had already been completed, but was forced to stop with the outbreak of the Second World War. The plan was abandoned in 1950 following the announcement made by London Transport that a new Greenbelt legislation severely restricted any construction to take place.
Enough battery for the whole journey. Cool.
The first station on the branch is Burnt Oak, with the suffix Watling added from 1924 to 1950. Step-free access will be implemented here at the station from 2022. The Charing Cross, Euston and Hampstead Railway were established back in 1891 and ordered to construct a deep-level tube railway through central London. In 1902, the railway became a subsidiary of the Underground Electric Railway Company and was headed by the American financier Charles Tyson Yerkes, who was also responsible for the building of today's Bakerloo, Piccadilly and District railways. The reason for why this line was extended in the first place to Edgware was for the creation of suburbs and for some custom to the railway. The CCEHR was affectionately known by many as the Hampstead Tube. Just to the east from here was Hendon Aerodrome, an important centre for aviation from 1908 to 1968. Nowadays, the runways have disappeared with the passage of time, but it is still possible to see aircraft at the RAF Museum, which is just a short journey away from Colindale Station. We are now in Hendon Tunnel, which is just 1,000 yards long. It takes us underneath the Midland Main Line, the M1 motorway and the A41 Watford Way. We are now travelling over the first section of the Edgeware extension from Golders Green, Hendon Central being the temporary terminus of the line for 9 months in November 1923. Here the line crosses the 6 lanes of the North Circular Road and the River Brent. As gathered by most of the stations on the extension, the buildings were designed by Stanley Arthur Heaps, and Brent Cross is no exception. It was the only station to open with the first phase back in 1923, and as such was just known as Brent. The cross suffix was added in 1976 with the opening of the nearby shopping centre. The line now crosses the street pattern for most of the way to Golders Green, contributing to the high cost of the extension, with compensation having to be paid to property owners for damage and disturbance. The area had built up quite rapidly when the Hampstead Tube first opened back in 1907. There are 3 through platform roads here at Golders Green, with the centre road used to terminate trains during peak periods. To our left is one of 2 main depots located on the Northern Line, the other being at Morden. When our line first arrived here, back on the 22nd of June 1907, Golders Green could have been best described as a hamlet with a few houses to its name. It was only later that there was an upsurge in house building, which has turned the area into the suburb of London that it is today. Golders Green was also the last station on the Northern Line to retain semaphore signals, being replaced in 1950. Unusually, there are 3 tunnel mouths, however the portal on the left is only long enough to accommodate a 1-coach train, used for shunting manoeuvres. We are now in Tube Tunnel all the way to Morden.
Section 1, pause for 2 seconds then.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Did you learn that since you've been doing work experience?
Yeah, but the first time I did it, I was such an eager beaver. I kept messing up, kept getting wrong.
Although unnoticeable, we passed through an area which could have been a closed station, though it never opened to begin with. The planned station was to be known as North End, or commonly known as Bull and Bush, and was only excavated at track level. The building of the station was cancelled in 1906, just a year before the opening of the line, because of the abandonment of the then proposed residential development, which would have significantly reduced the number of passengers using the station. The trailing crossover on the approach to Hampstead Station is where the line passes beneath Hollybush Hill. At 221 feet or 67 metres below street level, this is the deepest point on the entire London Underground. This is Hampstead, the deepest station on the Underground at 192 feet. Indeed, the classic Underground station tiles display Heath Street, yet it was never called this, only proposed. The name Hampstead has been here since day one. Most of the early station buildings were built by Leslie Green. Here at Belsize Park, we get a rough feel of what the station buildings look like, with an oxblood faience with 5 round arch windows.
The next station is Camden Town.
Camden Town is described as the crew of the Northern Line, as all branch lines connect and converge on the 4 platforms. On the 19th of October 2003, the last carriage of a 1995 stock train derailed whilst on the approach to the station while traversing a set of points. There were no fatalities, but 6 passengers had been given minor injuries as a result. The last carriage had been severely damaged by the impact. We are now on the City branch of the Northern Line and on the former City and South London Railway, the very first deep-level tube railway in the world. The company has its origins back in 1883, proposing to build a deep-level subway from King William Street down to Stockwell in South London. The royal assent was granted the next year, with engineer James Henry Greathead overseeing the construction, who had in 1869 and 1870 constructed the Tower Subway using the same tunnelling shield and cast iron methods. The CSLRs extended their services along here to meet up with the Hampstead Tube in April 1924, this being the most ambitious project in the history of the Underground, and was undertaken without disrupting any services. Notice the wide platform at Euston. This large platform tunnel used to house both the north and southbound tracks, with a narrow island platform only 14 feet wide, a classical feature seen at many CSLR stations. With the arrival of the Victoria Line in 1968, cross-platform interchange needed to be provided with the Northern, and in order to do so, the northbound platform was diverted and the space filled in. Barely visible, we can see a line diverge off to the right, used as a trailing crossover, but also for terminating trains to reach a reversing siding. Unusually though, the reversing siding does not finish with an end wall, but with a signal, numbered L22. Any trains that pass this signal end up on the Piccadilly line just before King's Cross Station. The connection mainly used at night by ballast or engineers trains from Ruislip Depot. King's Cross St Pancras is one of the busiest interchanges on the Northern, with connections to the Circle, Hammersmith and City, Metropolitan, Piccadilly and Victoria lines, as well as mainline services from the two termini at King's Cross and St Pancras, the latter having European connections since 2007. The station is the third busiest on the London Underground after Victoria and Oxford Circus, with 97.92 million entries and exits recorded in 2017. Northern Line trains had to run through here non-stop after the King's Cross fire on the 18th of November 1987, which killed 31 and injured over 100. It is to this date one of the deadliest accidents to occur on the underground system, and resulted in widespread safety improvements and changes throughout the network. Another narrow island platform that was only 12 feet wide was still in use here at Angel until 1992, after major fears of passenger safety increased during the end of the 1980s and early 1990s. A new northbound platform had to be excavated, with again the space filled in after its removal. In addition to this, the entire station complex had to be reorganised and refurbished. The lifts were replaced by escalators, with a vertical rise of 90 feet and a length of 61 metres, make these the longest on the underground. Angel was the terminus of the CSLR from 1901 to 1907, before the line was extended to Euston. We pass through the abandoned station of City Road, which opened with the extension from Moorgate to Angel back in 1901. All that remains above ground is the former lift shaft. The station, along with the rest of the line, was closed in 1922 when the CSLR enlarged their former 10 feet 6 inch diameter tube tunnels to the standard diameter of 11 feet 8 1/4 inches so that larger and longer trains could operate. City Road Station had particularly low usage on the Northern, therefore upgrading the station could not be justified on financial grounds, and so remained closed after the work was completed 2 years later. Here at Old Street, interchange is made with Great Northern's line from Finsbury Park to Moorgate, which run in full-size tube tunnels at 16 feet in order to accommodate main line rolling trains. Originally opened back in 1904 as the Great Northern and City Railway, the line became a part of the Metropolitan Railway in 1913, and then to appear as part of the Northern Line from 1939 to 1975.
You're in charge. I'm in charge, okay.
Just get comfortable. The seat's right, it's right comfort for my back.
It's a little bit better, isn't it?
It's better.
It's not perfect.
Because in the men's side of my family, all the men are lanky and, long.
Get back on.
Yeah.
Here you go. Can you see come up here is your
Crossover, yeah.
Yeah, that's it. There you go. So that's Moorgate. It's north of the station.
Right.
To the north to south and south to north.
The station at Moorgate lies close to London's financial district. A total of 8 platforms are in constant use, with passengers changing onto the subsurface Circle, Hammersmith and City and Metropolitan lines and Great Northern trains. It was here at Moorgate that the worst ever train crash in the history of the Underground occurred. Morning of the 28th of February 1975, a train on the Great Northern and City Railway, formed of a 6-coach 1938 stock train approaching the terminus, continued under full power and smashed into the end wall of the overrun tunnel. The crash had forced the first carriage into the roof of the tunnel and the front and back, whilst the middle coach remained on the track bed. The death toll was 43. This included the driver, who to this day will never be sure of the reason why he never stopped, but continued under full power. In the aftermath of the crash, London Underground introduced a safety system that automatically stops a train when travelling too fast. This became known informally as Moorgate Protection. Northern City Line services into Moorgate ended in October 1975, and British Rail services started in August 1976. After a long campaign by relatives of the dead, 2 memorials were unveiled in the vicinity of the station, one in July 2013 and one in February 2014.
Hopefully one day, be a train operator doing this.
You might not be on this line, you might be on a different line.
Yeah, I'd like to be on this line. The seat is adjusted to how I would need it. It's all...
Some of the newer stocks, I think the S stock, I think it's a lot more comfortable, but I've not been on the front of it.
It's a bit like the C stock, C way. It's not different, but it's not...
I think the new S stock are a lot more comfortable.
Would you like to go around this stock?
To be honest with you, I am thinking I'm sort of getting towards my, I've had enough now of the underground, of the Northern Lights.
Bank is yet another large interchange station with 15 escalators connecting with the various tube lines, one of which is the Waterloo and City line. The second deep-level tube railway in London opened in 1898 by the London and South Western Railway. In addition, 2 moving walkways link with the District and Circle lines at Monument Station. Incidentally, from 1900 to 1940, the station was known as City. From Moorgate, we are travelling over the first extension of the CSLR from Borough, opening in February 1900. The very original terminus of King William Street had been poorly sited owing to the steep incline towards the station underneath the Thames, which also limited its capacity. The decision was taken to extend the CSLR northwards to Moorgate, rerouting on a better course, meaning that the line to King William Street was abandoned.
5 minutes. Alright. 41 seconds. Alright. Watch your... Yeah, you're coming in now.
When it goes down to 0, 0, could you just press the red button on the top of it and then wait for it and then restart it? Thank you.
Having passed beneath the River Thames, we arrive at London Bridge, a light and airy tube station with step-free access to and from street level and the mainline station above ground. After the King's Cross fire, an independent report recommended that London Underground investigate passenger flow and congestion in stations. This included the Northern Line, and the platforms were rebuilt in the late 1990s, increasing the size of the platforms and circulation areas prior to the opening of the Jubilee Line. Coming in from the left is the tunnels of the very original route of the City and South London Railway from King William Street. After that station closed in 1900, with the extension to Moorgate, the tunnels were abandoned, although some trains were stored here for many years after that. The City and South London Railway design is to the fore here, as we now travel over the very first section of tube railway in the world, opening from King William Street to Stockwell on the 18th of December 1890.
Watching your platform till it disappears totally. In your road test, that's what they look for. If you're looking away,
yeah, you can't.
At the moment, it's one of the most important things now because it's automated.
Is there not like a book that I can look at, have a book and tell us your problems with the trains and what to rectify it?
There are stock defect books. I've not got any spare. I could try finding some for you.
I don't want to like.
I'm not sure if they.
I do want to ask you questions, and you know.
I don't know whether I would try and find out if I can get you a copy. Right, your things are red now, but let's wait till we finish at the next station, and then we can swap seats. You can swap your camera out.
Here at Elephant and Castle, there is interchange with the Bakerloo line and National Rail services. Kennington is where we join up with the Hampstead Tube once more, whose branch opened from Embankment in 1926. Very soon the Battersea Power Station branch will be opened, making this the newest part of the London Underground since the Jubilee Line extension in 1999, or you could argue the short branch of the Piccadilly Line to Heathrow Terminal 5 in 2008. From the Bank branch there will be no connection with the Battersea line, as that will have junctions off the reversing loop, which is only accessible from the West End branch. The connections with the West End branch to the Morden line are used in peak hours only. Located on Kennington Park Road, the station at Oval is named after the famous cricket ground just 500 yards away. There are a couple of things to look out for on the approach to Stockwell. To our left you will see part of the former access road to the CSLR's depot that was located overground, but trains had to be cable hauled there as the gradient was 1 in 3 to the surface. And to our right, the large space between the running lines, was where the original terminus was located, with a scissors crossover and narrow island platform. The official opening of the railway was inaugurated on the narrow island platform by the Prince of Wales, later King Edward VII, on the 4th of November 1890, a month before passenger services commenced. The station was relocated here in 1926. This proved easy for the Victoria Line planners to facilitate cross-platform interchange, as the Northern's platforms had been positioned on the outside of the running lines. Stockwell had only been the southern terminus of the CSLR for just 10 years before the company decided to advance southwards, with this section opening to Clapham Common in June 1900. At Clapham North, we can witness the original style layout still in use on the Underground to this day, with the narrow island platform tunnel housing both tracks. Until 1926, Clapham North was known as Clapham Road. Clapham Common is the only other narrow island platform on the entire underground system. Above ground is a small station entrance building, typical of those on the City and South London. This western entrance had a dome on top of it dating from the 1920s, where the mechanical equipment was stored for the lifts down to the platforms.
Customer information. Please ensure you wear your face covering, nose and mouth at all times.
For 26 years, Clapham Common was the terminus of the City and South London, until the last section opened to Morden on the 13th of September 1926. Morden hadn't been intended to be the terminus of the line. The CSLR had proposed that the route would continue to the south and utilise the track space of an unbuilt railway from Wimbledon to Sutton. However, by 1923, the overground sections were operated by the Southern Railway, who had immediately objected to the CSLR expanding to Sutton, anticipating the loss of their passenger traffic to the tube. Therefore, an agreement was made between the Southern and CSLR to extend to Morden, as long as the latter's running rights over the Wimbledon to Sutton Railway were given up. The station buildings on the Morden extension were built differently to those on the early sections of the line. Clapham South, like the others, were built with Portland stone by Charles Holden. Balham Station opened in December 1926, 3 months after the rest of the line. The mainline station was opened in 1856 by the West End of London and Crystal Palace Railway. Like many tube stations during the Second World War, Balham had been used as an air raid shelter. However, on the 14th of October 1940, a wartime bomb caused the northbound platform to partially collapse, and the station was filled with earth and water from fractured water mains and sewers. It's estimated that 64 people died from the explosion, 4 of whom were railway staff. In 2000, a plaque was placed in the ticket hall commemorating the 64 dead, only for another plaque to be installed in 2016, being built out of Welsh stone. The first plaque is now on display at the London Transport Museum in Covent Garden. Originally opened as Trinity Road, the station was renamed Tooting Bec in 1950.
What do you think of these new Hampstead Tube, by the way? You what? Platform humps. I really thought that I really noticed them. I'll point them out to you when we were here and met. Because me and Barry were there like 2 weeks ago, and it was like, what's the point of them? No lifts, there's only escalators. That's true, yeah. I wonder. I can understand for people buggies and wheelchairs. Yeah. That's it for the concept of that. You know, no reason why trouble.
The reversing siding at Tooting Broadway is not really used these days. On the 4th of May 1971, an out-of-service train entering the dead-end siding ran into it under full power, which resulted in the train crashing into the end wall. The driver was killed, and like that of the Moorgate disaster that would happen 4 years later, there is no reason for why the driver failed to stop. Suggestions on this occasion have ranged from the train's tripcock system not working correctly, or the driver had assumed they were entering the longer reversing siding at Kennington.
It will look a bit better when I upload it.
Despite its location, South Wimbledon isn't even in Wimbledon at all. It lies beneath the busy Merton High Street.
Sorry?
Level 5 or something.
Oh, do you know how to do it? You put it back towards you, low whistle.
Yeah. You want to try?
Low.
Oh, okay.
Use the low, you don't use the high.
Yeah, right back.
So, any second. Give it a little whistle now. That's it. We're going to go to platform 5.
But it says on the timetable you should up for free.
Don't worry about that. That
After travelling underground since Golders Green, we emerge into daylight at Morden, the southernmost terminus of the Underground, being 10 miles from central London. Befitting its terminus status, the platforms are partly spanned by a large overall roof, and there are at least 3 through platform roads, all of which continue beyond the station to Morden Depot.